Hi and welcome. I'm Anewz and you are watching Context. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to host Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in their first get-together since the 12-day war, when the U.S. joined Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites. With that ceasefire in place, the White House has shifted focus on the 20-month-old war in Gaza. A proposal Trump called the final one appears to have brought the Israelis and Hamas close to a truce, with one of the questions being, would that one become permanent? Hamas has said it is willing to free all the hostages in exchange for an end to the war and a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Netanyahu has said the war will only end when Hamas is militarily defeated or surrenders, disarms, and goes into exile. Some 2,000 kilometers to the north, the war in Ukraine is still raging, with the latest pushes from Washington for a ceasefire being stonewalled by Moscow. On how the U.S. president is living up to his promise of a peacemaker presidency so far, we're talking with John Kavulich, senior editor at the Washington-based Issue Insight. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining us. Nice to have you in the studio for a change.
Thank you.
Let's start with the latest. Netanyahu is in Washington set to meet Trump. Some are calling this his victory lap after the 12-day war with Iran. Now, there are, of course, different estimates floating about on the capabilities of Iran to restart uranium enrichment from ranging from months to years. Regardless of that, how much of a win would you say this is for Netanyahu?
You know, for Prime Minister Netanyahu, any time that he can get on a plane, come to Washington, and be seen with President Trump, that's a victory day for him, because it gets him out of Israel, it gets him to avoid his corruption trial, and as a matter of fact, part of what's happened has postponed him being in court. And it's a way for him to try to rally the troops. He knows that he has support within the U.S. Congress, the House and the Senate, and he's coming to basically rally his base, sort of his Israeli MAGA base. But does what he's doing in terms of this 60 days, does it move the process nearer to a resolution? And I would argue, I don't think it really does. And you can use Prime Minister Netanyahu's statements, the one you put in your opening piece, where he said that when Hamas is no longer in charge in Gaza, where it's no longer a military factor, where it's no longer a factor. He also made another statement in advance of his departure, where he said, this is over when Gaza is no longer a threat to Israel. Now that is a completely different statement than Hamas is no longer a threat to Israel from Gaza. What he's saying there is basically, the only way Gaza is no longer a threat to the state of Israel is if there are no Gazans, if there are no Palestinians in Gaza, if Gaza is a part of Israel and is inhabited by Israelis. That's sort of the unknown here, but I think it's something people need to take a look at and need to focus on.
How do you think that would bode with Trump? We know he's pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza. He basically called it his final proposal.
Yeah, President Trump, as we know, was very enamored with Gaza, Riviera Gaza, with Trump Tower and Trump hotels, on the waterfront. He sort of moved away from that. Now, it's important to remember how he defines victory. President Trump defines victory, whether it's total and complete, which he'll write on his social media, Truth Social platform, but he will also recalibrate by the minute. So if someone looks and says, okay, this was a win, and then there's evidence to suggest, well, it's not quite the case, i.e. the bombing of Iran, where it was obliterated, it'll never happen again. Well, maybe it was set by several months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years. Maybe the uranium was moved from where it was supposed to be to somewhere else for safekeeping. He adjusts. And so I think that he's going to look at this 60 days, if it's something that can happen, as he will say total and complete victory, this is what I brought. He'll then complain that look what I've done, and the Nobel Peace Prize will still be something that they don't want to give to me, but I will keep working at it. Prime Minister Netanyahu goes back to Israel, and we sort of keep this going because there's still hostages, Hamas is still there, and most importantly, the idea of Hamas is there. And the last now almost 20 months, what has Israel created? Generations of people who hate Israel, and they may be Hamas light, they may be Hamas heavy, they may not be Hamas affiliated, but they're all going to have the same thing in common. They hate what the state of Israel has done to the people of Gaza.
In the more, let's say, recent future, what do you see? Because Netanyahu is riding the wave of the strikes on Iran, which many hailed as a victory, including him, including Trump. You mentioned how Trump said they totally obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. How has that domestic support for Netanyahu, has it made way for him to maybe make some concessions on Gaza, regardless of his far-right ministers?
Yeah, if the results of Iran, and what's so interesting is that now looking back, if you ask most people on the street, who attacked who? Most people believe that Iran attacked Israel and Israel responded and then the US went in, which is so interesting because the Iranians say, well, wait a minute, we didn't launch this thing, Israel did, and then the US went on their backs. I don't think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to be able to gain a lot from this, and here's the reason why. One, what they're trying to snuff out in Iran, the current government of Iran, is knowledge. And it's the thirst for knowledge, and it's education. So what President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are basically saying to the Iranians that you can't have the ability to have a civilian nuclear program for nuclear power plants or for medical purposes. We don't want you to be able to do this. Well, how do you prevent people from learning, from wanting knowledge? And Iranians are Persians. They're not Arabs. They're different. And a lot of times people forget that. So I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to have a problem, which is the complete and total obliteration has not happened. Iran is going to continue their program in some way. And one of the messages Netanyahu is going to deliver to President Trump is, Donald, we're not done yet. We need to go back in and finish this, and you need to help us do that or give us the equipment and then we'll do it. But we're not done yet, which then gets into the domestic issue for Netanyahu, which is, yes, foreign policy and strikes like this, people rally around, but there's still those hostages in Gaza. And for the people of Israel, those are more important than what's going on in Iran.
Just a side note, a lot of people in Iran are actually Azerbaijanis, so not all Persians.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
There's one more thing here. Can the Gaza war be now one of the victories that Trump is going to be after to achieve, given his, well, let's be frank, failures regarding Ukraine?
Yeah, with the 60 days in Gaza, he's going to say that that's a victory, even if it lasts one day. And the fact is, if it's 60 days, what happens on day 61? Do we start this process again? What happens to the hostages? If right now, if you're Hamas, the only leverage you have are those hostages. And for Prime Minister Netanyahu, he'd prefer the hostages be dead. Because if they're all dead, and he can confirm they're all dead, the IDF will unleash on Gaza, like we've not seen, even as horrible as it is. So for Prime Minister Netanyahu, once those hostages are confirmed dead or they're out, you will see them lay waste. What they're doing now is bad, but wait till you see what they'll do then. And President Trump, he's just going to look at this and say, if there's something that there's signed, whether it lasts a day or 60 days, it's a win for me because I brought them all together. But if you're living in Gaza and you're now from the north, the south, and the west, you've been pushed, and 70, basically, you had 100%, now 2.3 million people are in 30% of what they had, and there's only one place for them to go right now, the Mediterranean Sea. So it's either they swim, they drown, or they drown, or they go somewhere else. And that's going to be the next discussion here. And for President Trump, it's all about the moment. So he's not looking that far down. He's looking at today's news cycle. And he'll have the picture with Netanyahu. He will take credit for the ceasefire being near or close. And then if it's violated, that's not on me, that's on them, but I still brought you the ceasefire.
Let's go over to Ukraine. If we look back, even during his campaign trail, Trump was saying, I'll deal with this in 24 hours.
Yep.
Then it went up to 100 days.
Correct.
Then it went up to several months.
And it actually, in between the day he was elected until he was inaugurated, he said he would get it done during that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then first, US-Russia contacts were made. We had the talks in Saudi Arabia. Eventually, we had even peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow. However, no real significant progress was made. During his last call with Putin, Trump said he's very disappointed. Now, how much would you say that Washington's approach to Moscow has changed since the early days of the Trump 2.0 administration, when both Ukraine and its European allies were shocked by the approach?
If you're Ukrainian, this has been that proverbial water torture. They've just been watching from the 20th of January to now into beginning of July, and it just hasn't gotten any better in terms of the Trump administration's engagement. President Trump, he has gone through some of the political stages of grief in that there was optimism, then it wasn't happening, and now it's just continued, and it hasn't gotten better for him. There's one element to this that that doesn't seem to have been out there, and that is, there's still a discussion with respect to, why doesn't Donald Trump say, Vladimir, it's over. I've had it. He said, I think he wants to keep killing people, and that's not good. But what President Trump has not yet said is, he lied to me. And that stems from President Trump's first term, where he looked at whatever President Putin was saying, but President Trump always said, he's never lied to me. You fast forward to the second term, and Volodymyr Zelensky, collectively the European Union, collectively NATO, were saying, this guy, all he does is lie to you, Donald. We had Crimea with Budapest, Minsk, all he's done is lie, his entire life. But President Trump always says, but he hasn't lied to me. And the one question that we don't know if President Trump has asked of President Putin, will you agree to the 30-day ceasefire? Has he specifically asked him that question? And thus far, it seems that has not done so because he doesn't want President Putin to say no. He wants to still be able to say that President Putin hasn't said no to him. Even when the last call they have, when he was saying, he doesn't seem like he wants to stop. He doesn't want to stop. He said that he's going to continue. So it wasn't President Trump saying, I said, Vladimir, you got to stop this now. Vladimir, you've got to accept the 30-day. Will you accept? I think he still wants to avoid the relationship becoming where then people have to say, Mr. President, he lied to you and he said no to you. Now what are you going to do?
Let's go over for a second to Moscow. I know you're really familiar with the situation. Why would you say that Putin is, to say the least, not eager for a ceasefire? What's the game here? What are they trying to do? Maximize efforts to take as much land as possible?
Real estate is a big part of it. When President Putin 2 years ago announced the annexation, basically of the Donbass region, Luhansk and Donetsk, he didn't control all of it, and people laughed at him. It was basically, I'm annexing this whole room, but I only control 5 square feet of it. People are like, well, come back when you have the whole thing. So that's been a big part of his game. He's got Crimea, he's got most of the Zaporizhzhia area, Sea of Azov, but he doesn't have complete control of those oblasts, those provinces, states, as we would call them. And that's a big part of what's driving him. He wants to seal that up because then he can say, when I started this, I was fighting Ukraine. When I'm now getting ready to say I'm done, I not only beat Ukraine for 20% of their territory, I beat NATO, and I beat the European Union. European Union, 18 rounds of sanctions, NATO, all the help they were giving to Ukraine, and then separately, even though the US is in NATO, I beat the Americans too. So I think that's sort of where we're seeing this go to. He also understands that he's winning. And this goes to what I call the elasticity theory, that President Putin is willing to do to get Ukraine to say enough what Ukraine is not willing to do to Russia, to say the same thing. Meaning, Ukraine will attack military targets in Russia, drones around airports, they'll attack ships, they'll attack planes, air bases and that. What does Russia do? They kill civilians. And if you want to get a democratically elected government as well as a democratic system where the media plays a big role, where public opinion plays a big role, that's what you do, because that's something that a government has to respond to. And so what have we seen since Iran? Iran was somewhat of a message from, not a deliberate message, but a message from President Trump to President Putin. Escalate to de-escalate. Because what did President Trump say before going into Iran? We're going to bomb them, and then they're going to give us peace, or we'll do it again. But this is the way we end it. We go big, and then, okay, I cry uncle, I will do peace. Putin looks at that and says, okay, and what has he done since that attack? They've escalated the attacks in Ukraine.
Every day is the largest yet.
Every day, sort of very Trumpian, right? Every day is the largest. Every day is more people getting killed, more infrastructure. The European Union can't replace everything fast enough. The US won't. And so you're President Putin, you're saying, I got a green light when the US attacked Iran, and now, yes, people are angry, yes, they're calling me a war criminal, etc. But I've got real estate, which hasn't much moved in 2 years, and I'm slowly getting a little more, but I'm killing a lot of Ukrainians, I'm making their lives miserable, and at some point they're going to say to President Zelensky, it's over. Accept whatever they want, and then we will do what Putin did, which is we'll sign whatever they want, and we'll wait him out, and when he's gone, then we'll join NATO, or we'll move forward with the EU, or we'll try to get our territory back, but just sign whatever the hell this nutcase wants and stop this. So I think that's the trajectory we're on. It's awful for the Ukrainians. As someone who was there when the war started, I was in Kharkiv. It's unjust, it's unfair, there's nothing right about it. But you also have to look at, there's great distance between what you want and what's likely to be the result.
Sticking with Russia and its relations to neighbors and the broader region, we had a very recent flare-up in relations with Azerbaijan. This is not the first time. In December, we had the plane that Baku says was shot down by Russia's air defenses. Now, an FSB raid in Yekaterinburg resulted in the death of 2 Azerbaijanis. Baku called for an transparent, full investigation, slamming it as a xenophobic, ethnic targeting raid, and so on. What do you think of this escalation of tensions, and how did Baku position itself?
And then, of course, the government here arrested the head of Sputnik News and then RT.
Their accreditation expired.
Right, it's so convenient, and there they go. You know, we were talking about this before we went on air with your colleagues, and you have people in Russia, not all of them, but you have people in the power centers who wake up every morning, and in their bedrooms they look at 2 images. One is of Stalin, and the other is of the map of the USSR with 15 republics in it, of which Azerbaijan was one. And that is basically how the Kremlin reacts to anything that happens. It would have been very easy for President Putin to say, I'm really sorry about what happened. We're going to investigate. I apologize for it. It was terrible. Send in all your investigators. Let's find out what happened. And again, so, no. And why not? Why not that graciousness and that appropriateness? Because they don't feel they have to. Because it is, we're Russia, you're Azerbaijan. What are you going to do? You're going to sever diplomatic relations? And then you know what we're going to do, because we're going to do what we always do, which is we're going to influence you one way or the other. Officially, unofficially, we're going to make a nuisance of ourselves. And then second, it's what else might Russia do? So Azerbaijan is concerned about that because of that escalatory aspect of it. And the president here, looks at all this and said, there's only sort of so much we can do. Real estate, we're connected to them. We have a border with them. Yes, we have Georgia. Yes, we have Turkey. Yes, we have Iran. Yes, we have Armenia. We have the Caspian Sea. We're in good shape as far as geopolitics and that, and we have a lot of friends. But this has been ugly. When you look at the videos of them grabbing the people out of the vehicles and the rest of it, it's like out of a television, America's Most Wanted, like they were capturing Osama bin Laden or something. It was crazy, but it's very performative. And as you saw, their people are dressed black. It's very militaristic. And that's sort of how they roll. It's to intimidate, but also it's simply President Putin knows that he doesn't have to apologize, so he's not going to, and that Azerbaijan, from his perspective, needs to be careful. And then also Azerbaijan knows that in President Putin's mind, it's still one of 15 republics.
Well, they're going to have to wake up to a new reality then.
Yes.
John, thank you so much for being here and for this awesome conversation.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you. That's all we had for you in this edition of Context. But do stay tuned to Anewz.